Hi, welcome to AQA Geography. Today we're going to look at the Urban Issues and Challenges section, which is a case study of a city in an LIC or NEE. And our example today, our case study today, is Rio De Janeiro. On the screen here we have the usual tab Geography Information, TAB, the absolute basics. Pause the video at this point if you want to review this information ready for the rest of the video. Here we have the usual tab Geography Information questions. You should be able to answer some of these questions now, having reviewed the tab Geography Information on the previous slide, but you'll definitely be able to answer them by the end of this video. If you want to have a go at them now, feel free to pause the video and have a go at these questions. Here's the blank information sheet. Can you remember what goes in each one of these boxes from the tab Geography Information at the start of the video? And of course, the main way of showing that you fully understand this information and you can remember it is by presenting it maybe in a format of your own or as a mind map and doing it from memory. Here's an example. Can you fill in this sheet using all the tab Geography Information? Have a go at that now if you want to. As a memory aid, we have all 4 slides here. We've got the information sheet, we've got the questions, we've got the blank boxes, and of course the blank mind map to show you how it all fits together. For some of you, it may help to remember some pictures or images about each one of the things from the tab Geography. So we've represented all the tab Geography information here in the form of pictures. Just pause the video here and just get familiar with these images. You'll be seeing these again later in the video. As a memory test, can you remember what the images were that goes in each one of these boxes? So for example, in the box on the top right hand side, there was the number 14 and there was a young boy who was 14 years old with the number half next to it. And what did that represent? As a final test with the tab Geography Information, and particularly the tab Pictures, can you remember what the headings were on the previous slide and how they fitted in with the pictures on the slide before that? So we're now moving on to the main part of this video, which is looking at the opportunities and challenges in Rio de Janeiro. So the opportunities, the good things, the advantages, and the challenges, which is the difficulties and the disadvantages of the area. Rio de Janeiro is located on the east coast of Brazil, located next to the Atlantic Ocean. It's got a population of about 12.5 million people, and that's in the city itself and the immediate local area. Here we can see a map of the entire region of South America and whereabouts Rio is situated. Again, it's on the east coast of Brazil on the Atlantic Ocean. Just take note of where it's located in Brazil. Could you find that on a map yourself? Just pause and just double check at this point. Rio de Janeiro is important at a regional scale because it has many factories that employ people. One of the ones you'll look at in the Brazil topic is the JLR factory, the Jaguar Land Rover factory. They invested £240 million into a new factory near to Rio de Janeiro. It created 300 skills jobs and also, of course, many other jobs in the supply chain. Also important to the region around Rio de Janeiro is the fact that Rio has 5 ports, and that is used by lots of areas around Rio de Janeiro, in the surrounding areas and even countries to export their goods, particularly raw materials to other countries. So we think about the iron ore, meat, soya, wood, and the iron ore mines such as the Vale mine, they export 50% of their iron ore to China. We've got the meat industry, the cattle ranching industry, which exports $6.9 billion of meat per year. So Rio de Janeiro is important at a regional scale because of its 5 ports. Rio de Janeiro is important at an international scale as it's recently hosted global sporting events such as the 2016 Olympics and the 2014 World Cup. One of the challenges in Rio de Janeiro is the fact that there's not enough energy produced, not enough electricity produced, and there's often blackouts that occur. These are going to particularly affect favelas such as the Racina favela. One of the opportunities, one of the good things that's happened recently, is the building of the $2 billion power station, HEP power station, hydroelectric power station, which has been built near to Rio de Janeiro, and that has helped to increase the reliability of electricity within the area. Another challenge in Rio de Janeiro is the high crime rates. This puts off visitors and investors coming to the area, which of course impacts the whole economy of Rio de Janeiro and the surrounding area. The city authorities have realised this and created the opportunity of having urban police forces, the UPP, and that focuses on drugs and the crime rates in favelas, meaning that the crime rates have now reduced and the city is now more attractive for visitors, more attractive for investors. And there was a particular focus on this during the World Cup and also Olympics to ensure that the visitors to the city were safe. Waste and water pollution is another challenge in Rio de Janeiro. Over 50 tonnes of toxic industrial waste and 200 tonnes of raw untreated sewage flows into Rio Bay per year. That affects the environment and also the social aspects of people using beaches. The authorities within Rio have realised this and created the opportunity of having 12 new sewage works and also 5 kilometres of new pipes to transport the industrial waste to treatment places elsewhere so it doesn't end up in the bay. So we have the challenge and also the opportunity. Water supply has turned out to be a large issue in Rio de Janeiro. In 1994, about 12% had absolutely no access to safe water whatsoever, even if it was a shared tap. And about 37% of water in Rio de Janeiro was lost in leaks. So that shows there's an environment, there's a place where the water pipes are not maintained and there's no investment in the area. However, in 2014, over 300 kilometres of new pipes were laid. That means that now 95% have now got access to safe water. The ones that won't are probably going to be in the favelas, such as the Racina favela. Unemployment is a big challenge in Rio de Janeiro, and even if people have jobs, about a third of people in Rio have what's called informal jobs. That means they don't have tax to pay, but they don't have rights, they don't have contracts, there's no sick pay, there's no holiday pay, and it's just an informal job, so there's no regulation around it. Of course, these are probably going to be low paid jobs, so you can see in the image there, it's probably like a fruit seller in the street or maybe a window cleaner, those kind of things where the resources, the materials are quite cheap to set up business, but the rewards are not great. The opportunity to solve this is the Schools for Tomorrow programme, and this invests in schools, particularly in favelas like the Racina favela. So more training equals more jobs, and that means that the government gets more tax paid to it to improve the infrastructure within the country. As we've mentioned in the previous slide, education is an issue, and at about the age of 14, only about half of children are still in school, and that's due to lack of money and it's due to few teachers being available. If the parents of the boy in the image here are very low paid, that means this boy will probably have to leave school to be able to add to the family income. And then the difficulty is this boy's children will also probably need to leave school at the age of 14 so that they can add to the family's income, and it becomes then a generational problem. So the opportunity to solve this and break this generational problem is giving grants, giving money to poorer families, and that stops people dropping out of school, and therefore they can be earning money at a higher rate when they leave school, and that stops that generational problem. Pollution continues to be a major challenge in Rio de Janeiro. Over the last few years, there's been a 40% increase in car ownership. The pollution from cars is thought to have caused about 5,000 deaths in Rio over the last few years. There have been a few steps to try and solve this problem of pollution. So for example, the new VLT tram system has helped remove some cars from the road. However, the difficulty in that is it's quite expensive to use, therefore lower income families are probably not going to be using the VLT tram system. As we saw on the previous slide, the 40% increase of car ownership in Rio de Janeiro has resulted in huge amounts of congestion or traffic jams in the area. That's particularly the case in rush hours, when people are heading towards work in the morning and leaving work in the afternoon. In addition, it adds to the pollution when cars are stationary and the engines are still running, and also it costs a huge amount of money. The authorities in Rio have tried a couple of ways to try and solve this, and one of the ways is the one-way system. So the image on the bottom right you can see is the rush hour in the afternoon, and of course the carriageway on the right is cars leaving the city. However, very few cars are entering the city at that time, so the authorities are planning to use both carriageways to leave the city at night and then use other roads to enter the city, and have some kind of system where they make sure that cars are all heading in the same way out of the city, and the same will happen in the morning. The image on the bottom right is lots of toll booths, so some of the roads in Rio de Janeiro are toll booth related. That means that people are going to have to pay more money to use those particular roads, and that money can then be used to help with the development of the VLT tram system, can be used to help with the reduction of pollution. Access to healthcare is a major problem in Rio de Janeiro. In some areas, only 55% have any access to health services whatsoever. That will particularly be concentrated in the favelas, such as the Racina favela. The reasons for this are the cost of healthcare, so some people will not have health insurance, and also the distance that's needed to be travelled to the local hospitals. So the hospitals are quite often not near to the favelas. One of the opportunities is that some of the hospitals have employed people to make home visits in favelas. That has had the result of increasing the life expectancy and also infant mortality rates in the area. So there's more babies that go on to survive that time after birth. We've already talked about the development of JLR, so this is some of the economic areas in Rio de Janeiro. Some of the industrial areas are in the urban zone. That creates growth, and as I said before, JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, has invested about £240 million into the new factory, creating 300 skilled jobs, and of course many more jobs in the supply chain that go into that factory. We're now looking at an example of an urban planning project, and we're going to look in some detail at the Racina favela. This is the largest favela in Rio de Janeiro. About 70,000 people live in this favela, and it's called the Favela Beiro project, and about £1 billion was spent on this favela to try and improve lots of different aspects of this favela for people living there. The £1 billion spent in the Racina favela and the Favela Beiro project helped to improve the infrastructure. So we talk about the roads, we talk about education, electricity, water supplies, healthcare, all those things that make everyday life work. About $1 billion was spent. As part of the £1 million that was spent under the Favela Beiro project, some of it has been spent on the UPP police force, which helps to reduce gang-related activity and drug-related activity to make the area safer, particularly in favelas such as the Racina favela, where about 70,000 people live. Under the Favela Beiro project, some of the $1 million was spent on health centres. That means some of the smaller health centres in the Racina favela were more accessible to people, and that has the resulting effect of increasing quality of life for people in the favela. In the Racina favela, part of the Favela Beiro project, some of the $1 million was spent on creating credit agencies, and that supports small businesses. That means that small businesses can go to the credit agency, they can borrow small amounts of money in order to move their business forward. In the previous years, that would not be the case. Many of the regular lending agencies would not lend any money whatsoever to people who lived in favelas. We've previously said that many parts of Rio de Janeiro are really quite steep and hilly, and it's on many of these hillsides that the favelas are built. This is unfavourable land, so other building projects do not take place there. So people who need to develop their own homes and build their own squatter settlements, this is where they've got to do it. It's the only spare land in the city, and it's quite steep, as we said before. So some of the $1 billion was spent on securing the hillsides, and that prevents collapsing slopes and ultimately collapsing buildings. As a review, have another look through these images. You've now seen all these images once, and just see if you can remember any kinds of data that ties to them, any kind of development points that we've talked about already. Pause the video here to glance over these images. Here's the title areas for the images. Can you remember the images that went inside each one of these title areas? Pause the video here and check yourselves at this point. Here's the slide where you're going to check, can you remember the titles of the images and also the images themselves? If in doubt, go back a couple of slides, or indeed go back to the individual presentation about each one of the topics. Thank you for listening today. That was White Glove Geography, looking at the urban issues and challenges within Rio de Janeiro, which is the case study of an LIC NEE city within the AQA Geography exam course.